Can't see us.
Leave it there. The picture looks better than I do.
Howdy, peeps. I'm back again.
Hello.
Today I'm with Jonam.
Hello.
He's an ex-Jehovah's Witness who I met online, I believe, through my group.
Mm.
So Jonam was kind enough to come on for a chat about what it was like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and how he helps the Jehovah's Witness ex-community now. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So,
very happy to be here.
Cool. I normally start by asking people, like, how did you come to be a Jehovah's Witness?
I was born in. So my parents, they came into it kind of as adults. That's kind of a tangly story in itself, but they were witnesses when I was born. So I was raised in it up until the age of about 6 or 7. Then they both got divorced. They both ended up disfellowshipped, or one was dissociated, but they got parted ways. And from that point, my mum was disfellowshipped, and that was all around the women being forced to stay in very toxic, abusive relationships thing. So it was either stay in a horrible relationship where she was being treated awfully, or leave. And so the elders told her she had to stay. And after a few years, she was like, can't do this anymore. So still being a believer, she met who would then be my stepdad, and she got disfellowshipped. She was going through a lot, so she didn't really go to meetings. But by that point, I'd very much grabbed onto the faith. And so I took myself and my younger sister to the meetings from that point forward, really. So I kind of became the spiritual head of my household at the ripe old age of 7.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I couldn't imagine that responsibility. Like you must have been really indoctrinated to, at age 7, want to, be that.
Yeah, I think from a young age, I very much I poured myself into it a lot. So I'd get home from the meetings, even as a small kid, and I'd like to stand on the little like stool in our front room and pretend it was a platform, and like give little talks and pretend I was the Watchtower conductor. So of course, to me, when you see something from birth, it seems normal. So I made friends with all the elders. That was my little community, and because I was home educated as well, that was really the only place to go. And so as time passed, other people have had worse home lives than me, but things were tough at times. And so it became a choice between either stay 100% of the time in quite a difficult home situation, or spend time with the congregation and, study and go to meetings and try and get their attention. So for me at the time, that combined with the whole theocratic gun held to our head of, this is the truth, and if you don't believe it, you're going to die. That all came together for it to just seem like a natural choice for me.
Right. Interesting.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Anne. I'm good, thank you. So, being homeschooled, so was there any like Jehovah's Witness stuff incorporated into that, or was it just like your basic maths, English?
Yeah, it was. So my mum was disfellowshipped for about 7 or 8 years, and during that time as well, my stepdad was very anti the religion, and he was anti homeschooling as well. So it was very much just like whatever we could hash together. I think through pursuing the religion and through bringing my sister into it as well, or I didn't bring her in, but kind of encouraging her as well, I'd created that commitment and consistency within myself where I was like, well, this is the right thing to do. This is the right way. This is, all of those things, they were accepted as just self-evident. So with the homeschooling, it was it was probably the only time I could actually study something and not be interrupted. If I was learning watch child stuff, or I'd sneak things, or I'd read the crappy Young People Ask book, which had never had anything that I was asking. It's like, well, who are these vanilla morons asking these questions? But they did they? Oh, someone's asked a good question. Did they treat me like a spiritual orphan? No. We I did have a study because I was terrified of war. I was terrified of Armageddon, and especially, well, the Great Tribulation especially. I'd kind of seen a few documentaries that were probably kind of above the age that I should have watched, but just, you know, concentration camps from World War II, things like that. And my young imagination ran a mile with that. So and living in Lincolnshire, I heard obviously the RAF base, I'd hear planes, and fireworks went off. I thought we were being bombed. So I was quite an anxious kid. And so my mum, while she was DF, she contacted the local elders, and they arranged a study for me. And, you know, it was an hour a week going through an assortment of books over a few years from the age of about 9. So it was, other than that, there was no effort to work with me in the ministry or to invite me along to places. In my mid to late teens, the kids in the congregation started to have more of a social life, but even then that was very limited. So that's a very wordy answer, but no, it wasn't a spiritual orphan. I was treated like an adult who was the spiritual head of the family and who needed to get my sister and myself to the meetings and be all studied up, and I was treated with a lot of responsibility because I had an old head on young shoulders. So it's a two-edged sword, you know. That's forced me to develop quite quickly, you know, mentally, and so I see the benefits of it. But at the same time, if I had a son, I would want them to be treated a bit better. I would wish something different.
And you saying about being an anxious child, that's totally understandable, because they drum into you about Armageddon. So even when there's like a thunder and lightning storm, you're thinking, is that Armageddon? Oh, this is kicked off in such and such country. Is it Armageddon? So from a young age, like, it is instilled into you that all these things, it's Armageddon. And I've mentioned before, I was scared into getting baptized at 13 because I was repeatedly told, like, if you don't get baptized and Armageddon comes tomorrow, you're going to die. So you've got that on your mind as well. So then you have nightmares about dying at Armageddon. And something you mentioned to me as well was a lot of your family wasn't Jehovah's Witnesses. So you also would be worrying about those are going to die at Armageddon as well.
Yeah, I'd be praying for Armageddon to at least not come for a while. And I was praying for it to be put off for many years, because it was more so the Great Tribulation part of it. Because the paradise, that sounds nice, that's all pandas and, you know, all nice stuff. But the bit where it says the tribulation such as the world hasn't experienced before, the more I looked at history, I was like, humans have done some awful things. How are we going to beat that? So I was terrified, and yeah, for a few years, I went through a very rough patch, being afraid of that, and that was top of my mind until. And I remember I was like riding my bike around the house with my sister. We both just had new bikes, so we're riding around, and I was like 14, and I was kind of ranting a bit about how, you know, our mum's disfellowshipped, like all these people in our family, so we just need to get used to the fact that they're just going to drop dead. They're just all going to be executed. And you know what? Our feelings about this do not matter. They're not relevant. And I didn't. I think at that point I could have either said, "Hang on, what kind of a God would be the God of genocide? Is that someone we want to be on the side with, or the organization's wrong?" Or I could kind of take their side and say, well, this is just the way it is, and I either need to toughen up or just not cope. So I toughened up, and I just accepted it and internalized that as a viewpoint.
So See, I remember my mum like trying to convert my nan, and I used to be thinking, please, please have a study convert, because my nan was lovely, and obviously I was thinking, if you don't, you're not going to get through Armageddon. So you're a young child, it goes through your mind a lot.
Yeah. Starshines, that's a good question, which I'll answer in a second. But to that point that you just said, I put a workshop, I put a webinar together talking about the different mind control mechanisms that the organization uses. I can't go into all of them, like there's a bunch, but the one that's very powerful is putting people into a state of survival. And when we go into a state of survival, like literally our brain shuts down. So in psychological operations in the military, this from like firsthand, trained by the same people, is that you put people into a state of fear. Even if you just mention death, or you mention someone dying, it literally creates a response in the brain where the prefrontal cortex, the part where rational thought and all this, our logic is stored, that shuts down, and our limbic system activates. It puts us in adrenaline, it puts us in survival, and we're not thinking long term. We're thinking in this very short box of, how am I going to survive right now? So if you want to manipulate someone, you slip things like that into a conversation, and you keep them in that state of in that state of fear. Now, that's one of the many points. But you think about it, like how just week in, week out, it was constant death and destruction. It was constant, the world's going to end. And that keeps us from a very young age in this habitual state of just fear. And that makes us even more malleable than we are already as children. To answer Starshine's question, was I worried about my sister's spirituality? Yeah. I think it was, to me, I'd accepted without question that this is the truth, this is the way to live, this is the way to survive. And so, and me as the big brother, obviously, you big brother, you protect your younger siblings. And so that was the best way that I could do that. And it just seemed my natural role at that point. So yeah.
That's heavy for a child. So being as though your parents were disfellowshipped, did you get away with not having any restrictions as regards what music you can listen to, what films, or being as though you were so wanting to be spiritual, did you find just policing yourself for that?
Yeah, I was very, it was kind of a weird upbringing. The household was mostly JW in terms of the rules and restrictions and that, with some wiggle room. So we watched Harry Potter and that was fine. We just didn't tell anyone about that. And is this understanding of like, well, some things you just don't ask, don't tell, which seemed harmless at the time. And here's the thing, something I've realized about the nature of religious trauma and the way that we were trained and programmed is that there are different kinds. And one is like a high impact experience where like something big and bad happens and that's overwhelming. And then we're dealing with that for a long time. The second kind is where it's insidious, where it's more like poison. Like if you put mercury in the ocean and that goes into the fish, that's not, the fish is still swimming and getting on with their lives, but they've internalized the poison, the toxin, without realizing it. And that is more my experience with it. So this idea, just lead a double life. There are this authenticity thing seemed like a dirty word to me for the longest of time. So just hide who you really are and give people, without lying, but just by being economical with just how open you are. So I learned that very very early on. Did I feel self-conscious? Truthfully, I had it more as a badge of honor. It was for me, I integrated that as like an ego structure, almost like, look, I'm strong enough to do this on my own. All these other pansy ass kids with their dad's an elder and their mum's a pioneer and they're struggling, and I'm in this situation and I'm at least, you know, I'm doing well and my answers are good and my talks are good. So this little competitive side in me treated it like a bit of a gauntlet, or like a situation where I could prove my prowess. So interestingly, no, I noticed it, that some people were a bit judgy, but I also, people seem to like me, and which may seem shocking to some people who actually know me, but there was some affection for me, but not support. So I recognized that, and that was like the carrot at the stick. That was a cookie that I was working for. So yeah, not self-conscious, but I took it on as a challenge.
I can imagine like the feeling of pride, because that's another thing they drummed into you. Stick up for yourself as a Jehovah's Witness and be proud. And I remember we couldn't go into assemblies at school, and they used to take us out, and they used to get a Jehovah's Witness come and sit with us. And I don't know what we were looking in. I don't know whether it was like, I don't think it was my book of Bible stories. I'm not sure. There was something, and they drummed into us about be proud. And this kid come up to me in the schoolyard and went, "You're a Jehovah's Witness," and I went, "Yes, and I'm proud to be one."
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I just thought, how embarrassing. Why did I just like say that? But it had just been drummed into me that that's what you say to people, you're proud. And I just thought, I'm really not. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah. It's the script that we get given, and you know, everyone's indoctrinated to some degree, but in our case, it was all in this one space, and all of the words, all the behaviors, they were there, and it was a substitute for thinking. And so for a young mind, and for a vulnerable mind as well, the people who cults tend to attract are either people who are born in, obviously, or it's people who are in a state of being vulnerable. They've had a big shift in life, and in those times, our mind is looking for shortcuts, because life just feels overwhelming, and we need something to help us. To help us make sense of things. And so here is it's like a business in a box, but for spirituality. It's like, hey, look, we've thought through it all for you. It all makes perfect sense. Just do as we say. We've done all the thinking for you. Just do as you're told. And to a child's mind, and to a person in a bad situation, that can be like an oasis in a desert. And it just sadly turns out to be poisoned.
Yeah. So how were your teenage years for you? Was you still going to the meetings on your own?
Yeah, there were a few on and off patches. We, my mum and stepdad got divorced and remarried during that time. So there was this kind of roller coaster that happened. During that time, I did stop going to meetings for a summer. It wasn't long, but for a few months. And I actually started doing a bunch of research into, like, I read all the conspiracy theory stuff I could get my hands on, like, you know, David Icke and lizard people and the whole works. And I was, you know, just finding new ways to scare myself, basically. And at that point, I started to question. And I was still having my study at that point. I went to the study conductor and I said, look, I've got all these questions. And his answer was along the lines of, well, if you've not, you know, you've been studying it all your life, if you've not made up your mind by now, then sort yourself out. And he ended the study shortly thereafter. Wow. And so even at that point, and this is, you know, what a mug I am, even at that point where I should have been going, actually, no, this isn't for me. Rather than pursue the questions further, I was like, well, this is the closest thing to having an answer that I have. So then I fell back into the religion again. And so rather than leave, I was starting music college at that point. And I was like 2 weeks in, and I realized I've either got to choose this life or I've got to choose a religion, but I won't be able to do both. And so then I'd learned by that point that, well, you know, if Jesus could get nailed to a piece of wood and suffer to that degree, then I can give up a few little things, like a career. So I gave up the college. I got baptized. I started hanging out with some friends and relatives a few towns across. And so I got more into the religion then, and actually started to have a social life. So someone's asked, what more? I think people can see the questions, can't they? So yeah, was more pressure put on? No. But no pressure down and no pressure up either, like meaning no support. It was very much a case of me having to chase them for everything. It's like, okay, I've sold the idea of the religion to myself. I want to pursue it. But I even wrote elders letters, emails for sure, where I was like, look, I've been asking for help in this way. The whole family's been asking for help. My mum's a spiritual widow, as you call it. My sister, my siblings and myself are spiritual orphans, as you call it. And, there's been this situation, that situation. Nothing's been done. And so I was like a little vigilante. So no wonder the elders didn't like me too much at that point. And even in there, I said, look, the sheep's job isn't to coach the shepherds on how to be a shepherd. If you've taken on this role, if you've taken on this title, then you need to be living up to that. Otherwise, you're a fraud. But they weren't living up to it. So I took that role upon myself as the man of the house, spiritually speaking, to try and set a good example there. So yeah, the congregation was very much like, if I did good things, then they'd give me some approval and give me privileges and all that stuff. But it was like having a parent who doesn't really give a crap about you and isn't paying attention. That was my relationship with the congregation.
So was it teenage years you ended up meeting a girl?
Yeah. So the timeline gets... it's a bit muddling. It was hard to compress it all into a few sentences for the summary. But so through teenage years, got baptized at 17, which is old, I realize. And then shortly after that, I basically was hoping for more kind of love and support from the congregation. That didn't happen. So of course, the next best thing, I was like, well, I'm starting to kind of get some attention from girls, so this is nice. And so that then became my fix, where it's like, wow, people are actually giving me what I needed, which was love. And that so that invariably, that very predictably, inevitably turned into sexual relationships as well. That was like late teens, I think just turning 20. It was that kind of year. So I got disfellowshipped once, and confessed. I'm a chronic confessor. That's my illness. So I did it, and even leading up to it, I was like meeting with the elders, saying, I'm talking to this girl, and she was a witness too, but she was kind of on her way out, and she was like married but divorcing, so not technically, it was a mess. And they're like, well, have you humped her? And I was like, I kissed her. And they're like, well, be careful. And so this, I like narrated my own demise as I went along. Got disfellowshipped once, then worked really, really hard to get reinstated. Towards the end of that, which was about 18 months, I met or connected with a childhood friend who lived in Australia at this point. And so we sparked it off, and like lots of chemistry, and she was like really supportive, and bless her, I pity her being with my younger self, because obviously I was in that state. And so she arranged to move over to the UK, and we were going to be together. And here's an awful thing that's really embarrassing to admit. I was on the cusp of being reinstated, but I really wanted to be with her. So I got her to agree to marry me, and I took out like a loan and started arranging the elopement so that we could do everything like scripturally, and not get disfellowshipped. And all of that fell through. The whole situation turned into an absolute dumpster fire. She landed here. We ended up having a bit too much fun, and then another thing kicked off, and the combination of all of that, this feeling where I've just been reinstated and I've fallen again. It's so embarrassing to go and admit to this stuff, and then the relationship just went horribly south, and so I ended up going on this huge, like, just drank a monstrous amount of alcohol on a night out. Had this breakdown in the middle of Lincoln. I was a mess. And then when I got home to my hometown, so I basically was still awake, hadn't slept all night, drank a huge amount. And so the thing in my head was, well, let's overdose. Let's raid the medicine cabinet and see what that does. And it wasn't a genuine suicide attempt, but it was an oblivion-seeking exercise. Like if I discovered weed at that point, I'd have smoked 3 joints and knocked myself out for a few days. That's really what I was after, but I didn't know, I didn't know any differently. So I just took what I could get my hands on, and thankfully, though I did end up in the hospital for a few days, thankfully, obviously it wasn't fatal. So at the time, the situation around the girl was what got blamed for that. And I didn't tell the elders about the sin. I didn't get disfellowshipped for another year after that. But then I started living a complete double life. I was like, well, I'm already a dead man walking, so I'm going to live very nihilistically. I'm going to try what I want to try. I'm going to go and do all these things, but it was in a very wounded state of mind. And I didn't even twig at that point that it was the mindset of the religion that had led me to that point, and that was wrong. Because the mindset of the religion is it's better to literally physically die than to fall away from the faith. And because of that, it's the religion of where suicide is the best option for everyone. In mass murder preferably first, because then you've got everyone into the new system. Like that, no one else really twigged on. I had a couple of friends who I spoke about that with. I'm like, we do realize this is what we're teaching, and they're like, yeah, but let's not word it that way, because that'll scare the horses. That's bad. But
when you stop and think about it,
yeah. So that created this very nihilistic backdrop for me, where I was like, well, the worst thing that can happen is that I'll die. And that's really the best thing that could happen. So I didn't end up resenting the girl, as someone's just asked. I didn't end up resenting her. I just got on with it. I was very heartbroken by that thing. That was my first experience of having like a proper relationship where someone wanted to be with me, and I wanted to be with them. And so the fact that fell through, I was very, very heartbroken. And this is another thing that stems, and I see a lot when I work with people who have gone through this kind of situation. When we were growing up, all of our value was placed outside of ourselves. All of our value was, well, how much can you fit into this box? How much can you put into this box? How much can you report on your report card? It was all external, and it was all in the validation of this organization. After that, when people leave, even if we stop believing the doctrines, we can still have that habit of needing that acceptance, of needing the validation from other people as well. So people often find themselves in a similar situation, if not with a religion, maybe with a narcissistic partner or with another manipulative or high control organization, because nature hates a vacuum. So if we get rid of one thing, our mind is going to suck something else to replace it that's of a similar shape, unless we fix some things. So yeah, because I'd placed so much of my self-worth in the idea of having a relationship, when that fell through and the religion fell through as well, it took me out of any kind of conscious or logical thought, and I was just in hedonistic, let's get on the dating apps, let's go, meet a load of people and and just try and enjoy myself in the meantime until the end comes in the next year or so.
At one point you said to me it took you 2 years to stop blaming yourself, and yeah, I can understand that. Like, when I left, I didn't really feel that much guilt because I knew that much that I just wanted a life. And then after a few years, I stopped believing. So, like, you know, I just thought, well, I just want a life. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do because I'm going to die at Armageddon anyway. So,
I'm the roller coaster has another up and down, because so after that little year of hedonism, I met randomly with some witnesses in where is it, Southampton, and one of them actually just messaged me like last week, just randomly reached out for the first time in like 4 years or so, to invite me to the memorial, which was sweet of him. But I did take in the spirit, you know, it's very sweet. But so I met them and I was like, yeah, do you know what? I can put my life right. So I went back. I started, you know, straightening up and keeping my nose clean, and got a witness girlfriend. And then we fell into sin, only a little bit of sin, but enough to be kind of in the bad books. So then we went and confessed to the elders, and in my judicial committee, they coerced me into confessing to things from previously that they didn't know about. So they lied one of them lied in the judicial committee, and got me to share information that I wasn't happy to share. And then they kicked me out. So by that point, I'd resold myself and bought into the religion again, got disfellowshipped. I was at the meeting when it was announced. My then girlfriend was at the meeting with me to like show support. And so I got kicked out with the understanding that I would work really hard to get back. So I was diligently attending meetings and studying for a further 18 months, 2 years. And so with the person I met in Southampton, I'd lied to them when I met them, and I just made out like I'd known some witnesses growing up. When I got disfellowshipped, I messaged him. I was like, yeah, you know, you're a really nice person, but here's the actual situation. I'm getting disfellowshipped tonight. So he, it's really sweet. You know, he kept my phone number for 4 years, just over, and, you know, reached out to check in and see how things had unfolded. So yeah, I don't take that as an insult. I think when you see people who are still in, it's like you're dealing with people who are trapped in like a goldfish bowl, and and they've been poisoned. They're like that fish who's been fed a bunch of mercury. You know, I find it now, even towards the elders who treated me really badly, some of them, I find it hard to be angry at them, because I know what they're in, and I know that when I was in that, I was just as zealous, and I was just as judgmental, and I was all of these things that are really easy to judge. And I'm like, well, I did it, and I know the reasons I did it, and I know the reasons they're doing it. So how can I know that and pretend like I've got moral high ground? It's awful, but it's not because they're awful. It's that they are in an awful system.
So you eventually started studying hypnotherapy?
Yeah. So in the midst of that, I had an interest. Darren Brown, if you've seen him, Darren Brown became big in the UK when I was in my teens, and that was another like don't ask, don't tell thing, like Harry Potter, because it's you know, it's kind of touching on some spooky stuff or on some psychology, understanding the mind, all that dangerous stuff, and
making you do things.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When you're hypnotized, you go into open state. Like, where are the demons when you're asleep? That's what I want to know. Anyway, so I was really into psychology, and I found it fascinating how the mind worked, but how change was possible. So throughout my teenage years, I was really interested in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, psychology, hypnotherapy. And then as I got old enough to, work and pay for courses and training, then I started going on the training like around the age of 20 to learn these things, mainly to help myself. So while I was disfellowshipped, the first time is when I really got into the training and realized I had a flair for it. And so I started pursuing it as a career, one, to help myself. So every time I learned a new thing, it was like, well, how can I use this on me? And because even without realizing that I needed to dig out the religion, there was plenty of other stuff to work on. I was a mess. So there was plenty to excavate. And then over the past 4 years, since I got disfellowshipped the last time, the final time, I've kind of thrown myself into this as a career, and ended up working on cruises and different resorts around the world. And in the past couple of years especially, which coincides with when I really started to wake up and do the research I needed to do, I started working with a company called Applied Behavioural Research, which is where we're using the more military grade side of psychology. So that's the training that gets given to FBI and CIA operatives. The behavioural table of elements is on the wall at the FBI training academy. Is legit, and is very results focused. And so when we partnered, the focus was very much on how can we bring these skills to helping people keep themselves safe in the civilian world. This was designed to keep undercover operatives safe when their lives are on the line. So in civilian life, when we're trying to, be safe and successful and happy, how can we use these skills to create the changes we need to create and to keep ourselves safe and protected? So that's been the journey since getting disfellowshipped, in a very shortened, abbreviated version.
And you also launched a podcast. Is that the New Life Academy?
Yeah. So at the beginning of last year, I stopped going to meetings at the beginning of 2019. There's some just personal stuff kicked off in the family and all these other just an absolute freak show that happened. And so I was like, well, look, I just can't be jumping through these hoops. I tried to get reinstated. I applied about 7 times, 7 or more. And every time they're like, nope, you put your life right, you're doing good, we really like you, but we can't reinstate you yet. And I said, why? Do you think God's not forgiven me? Like, no, we think God's forgiven you. I'm like, so you're less forgiving than the God you're claiming to represent. So they're like, no, you've got a bad attitude. So that was my story on a little loop cycle for a while. But I stopped in the beginning of 2019. And I didn't look into the religion, but I did start exploring other versions of spirituality. The idea of, like God isn't some genocidal maniac was an interesting starting point. And so I was exploring things that were off limits. So I was already kind of out, but there was a part of me that still believed. And at the beginning of 2020, when America's bombing Iran and COVID starts kicking off, I'm like, oh, the memes start coming out. What chapter of Revelation's going on in the news today? And I felt this anxiety. And I'm not an anxious person. Like that's just foreign to me. And I felt this. And I was like, this is just not me. What is it? And then I realized, well, it's my doomsday fears. And I thought, well, I've paid too much money and I've traveled too far to have too much training to tolerate this. So I started working on it, and then I started researching the organization. And it was like I spent a whole night, which many people do who I've spoken to. It's like you first start researching and you break through that barrier of giving yourself permission to look at JW facts and all these things. And I just plowed through it, and it was like an adrenaline rush. And I was like, the foundation of my reality was a lie, and yet that was very liberating. So at the beginning of last year is when I really started to make a break from the religion, and I made the final steps in using what I've known to help myself cut those ties. then I realized that it wasn't just me. Up until that point, I thought, well, everyone's, the organization's mostly fine, and it's just me who had a bad experience. So I get onto the Reddit, and get into your Facebook group and other Facebook groups. I see the case studies or the histories of people, and I see that there are tens of thousands of people that we know of, probably hundreds of thousands who we don't know of, who are in an awful state years or decades after leaving the organization. And it was at that point that I realized that, well, the things I've learned, the NLP, the hypnotherapy, we use this regularly to help people break lifelong phobias, to break through anxiety, to just leave things in the past, and to process it, and to rebuild yourself and move on. Like that was my bread and butter for the past 4 years. And I realized that the things that I take for granted, where if I have a problem, I know how to solve it for myself, that was denied to so many of us. And so then last summer, on my birthday, actually, in August the 21st, I did a birthday launch and launched the New Life Academy. So we have the podcast where I'm interviewing ex-members and also industry professionals and therapists and people from other groups, with the focus on strategies for recovery. And also I've put together a hypnotherapy program. I've put together a workshop and some workbooks just to be available to try and share some of my luck. Frankly, I was very lucky to stumble into the training and the material, and although my family life wasn't ideal, it was, there it is. It was.
I'll put the link in the comments as well, so people can.
Thank you.
Can find
Yeah,
it.
if you see the free resources link up at the top there, there's loads of stuff, and adding to it all the time as well. So, I was very lucky to have a family that allowed me that freedom to at least do that bit of research. So I'm continually trying to share more and more free things to help people break through that, because leaving the organization is one thing, but healing from it's a totally different ballgame. Starshine in the comment there, yeah, when we're born in, to actually break through that. Break through that indoctrination, it takes work, and it's not that it has to be impossible, but it does take work, and it takes the right kind of work. It's definitely possible, but it's not going to happen by accident.
Yeah, like I've been left 24 years and I haven't believed Armageddon was going to happen for 20 of those years.
Nice.
And I still have nightmares about it though.
Yeah.
And it's like, because it's just that ingrained in you, even if you don't believe it anymore, the residual parts are still there in your subconscious.
There's a, you're spot on. I put together a webinar that's on the site, which is, what is hypnotherapy and what the governing body doesn't want you to know about it. So that's got the mind control mechanisms, and it explains about the unconscious mind. And, we don't get what we want in life. We get what we practice. And so what did we practice for years? We practiced believing Armageddon's going to come. So even after we've stopped believing it, that unconscious part of us, the part that, when you tie your shoelaces, you don't think about it, it's automatic. When you write your name, or if you drive your car, that's all automatic. So the beliefs and the fears, they were put in that same box in our head that was automated. So then the task becomes, using different tools to go in and clear that out, to get rid of these old programs that are lurking beneath the surface. Otherwise, they'll stay there ad infinitum.
Yeah. And we're 47 minutes in. I know you've got to shoot off.
I've got a hard stop in 10 minutes, but.
Is there anything else you want to add? Is there any last advice you would want to, give to people?
anyone who has any questions, obviously type in the comment box, because answering questions is easier actually. In terms of advice, I think one of the biggest things is that we need to get to know ourselves, and we need to explore ourselves and our own minds and our own feelings, and not to get caught in loops, but just to give ourselves that permission to actually look and see ourselves, examine ourselves. So starting by just giving yourself the permission to stop, to take stock of, where you're at, where you've been, where you want to go, and realize that this is your life. One of the biggest and one of the most tragic things we got stolen from us is this idea of personal sovereignty, which is a big word in the kind of woo-woo spiritual world now. But we were indoctrinated to believe that our way doesn't belong to us, even if we're trying to direct our step. Is that we were indoctrinated that we, as humans and individually, don't deserve to make decisions for ourselves, that we need someone else to do that. And so if we bring that unchallenged into our future, then we can end up in highly toxic relationships, toxic life situations with friends, colleagues, bosses, lovers who just take advantage of us. So reclaiming this idea of sovereignty, of personal sovereignty, which is that your mind and your body and your life and what you do with it belongs to you, and that's your prerogative to choose what happens with that. That seems obvious, but actually believing that and embodying that is a big breakthrough to make. And I think once you've made that breakthrough, and if you can just get to the point of feeling courageous about it, like it may not feel easy and we may not even feel joyous about it, but we can just feel, I'm brave enough to face this. And this idea that, the greatest treasures in life are to be found where we least want to look. I believe that's true. So if we can break through that barrier and reclaim our own sovereignty for ourselves, then that's the starting point. And we can treat the past as a training ground rather than as a life sentence. So.
Hello, only one frost. That's
Hello,
the one.
Frost.
Me and my mate Anthony, who commented earlier, we decided to do like a night playing Mortal Kombat
Nice.
live just for a laugh, and he came in and commented, and then he's like, "Oh, your channel looks interesting subjects." So then he subscribed. So
yeah, it's fascinating.
One non-ExJW who will get to know the real deal.
Well, it's relevant. It's even to non-witnesses. This is relevant because. I don't know many people who aren't giving away their sovereignty, who aren't giving away their power to other people. So we're an extreme example. Our background is an extreme example, but it can apply to a lot of people. So I hope people watching can get some value from that.
Yeah, and I put your link in the comments so people know.
Thank you.
Where to find your website? To be honest, I've never done hypnotherapy myself. I don't know whether it's something that's residual again. I've seen people do it in pubs, and I've always been a bit dubious, like whether they were acting or whether it was real or and I've always been a bit scared of it, to be honest.
Well, if you get chance, so I put together that webinar just explaining, like taking all the things we were told, like it's mind controlled and you'll cluck like a chicken and all these things, demons, possession. It answers all of those things and just explains some of the science. But also there's I put together a free program as well that's it's just available there. And there are 6 sessions, because I noticed as I work with people and as I speak with ex-witnesses, there are some things that are unique and individual, but there are some really common themes for so many people. And so for those ones, I've put together just 6 sessions, and there are some exercises to do. So if you want to, and for anyone watching who's curious to have it demystified, and wants to see, well, the things that Hollywood and the governing body told me were probably lies, which is true. Then so what is the actual truth? Well, you can do your research, you can watch the thing and experience it for yourself and see if it's something that's valuable to you. So that's there as a resource for people to try out and see if it can help them break through some of those layers while people I lost my train of thought. It can be good. I got distracted by someone making tea. I'm like, yeah, I need a cup.
You need a cup of tea.
It's been at least an hour since I've had a cup of tea. My Brit fuel tank is kind of getting low.
See, I'm a coffee person. My coffee mug is about a pint, and I drink strong black coffee all day and pints of water at the same time. So I only drink tea if I run out and I have to have it black, because I like my drinks to taste like strong.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Purist.
It is known as a very British thing, isn't it, to have a cup of tea? But you're going to have a quick one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm sorry it's been rushed.
It's been very interesting. Thank you for sharing your experience with us growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, and thank you for the help that you are giving the community now, because we definitely need it. Like you said earlier, there's not a lot of therapists that have the first-hand knowledge. No. When I went to my therapist, he said to me, you won't believe the amount of Jehovah's Witnesses I've seen, but he's never been there, for himself. So it's great to know that more and more people are taking up that as a career to help us, because we are a huge community, and so many of us are damaged and need help and therapy. So thank you for doing that for us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
And thank you everybody for watching and commenting. Great. And I still haven't done an outro, so I'm going to sit here awkwardly again. I click end stream thinking, has it stopped yet? Is it not? But so let's get to
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.